This audio was recorded for the Heads and Tails Mental Health Project with Chilli Studios.
So, feel free to.
Okay, hello everybody. Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Layla got in touch with me and asked me if I would come along to speak to you about the history of St Nick's. And thank you very much for expressing an interest in the book itself. It's always nice to know these things. She gave me a list of questions, which I thought were good questions. Some of them I don't know the answers to. So what I thought I would do is to go through the questions and to answer the questions as best I can. And if you have any other questions on top of that, then please feel free to ask them. Right, first question was, who proposed for the farmhouse to become the site for St Nicolas Hospital and why? Where can we find the proposal in the archives? This is where I'd done a little bit of homework myself before coming along. The actual farmhouse itself wasn't the actual hospital. The farmhouse at the time was next to the land where the hospital was being built. But the farmhouse was part of it. And there were patients in the farmhouse, but that was only because Bensham Asylum, which is where they were originally, because Newcastle Council had a contract with Gateshead to look after people whilst Newcastle built their own asylum. Because it was getting overcrowded in Bensham, the farmhouse was taken over temporarily to accommodate some patients until such time as the hospital itself was built. Who proposed for it to become the site for St Nick's? The site that they chose, which was in Kenton, I mean, if you can imagine, in those days, we were talking about the mid-19th century, and that any asylum in the country was built out in the countryside, away from the town and the cities, but not too far away, but far enough away to be separate. And of course, over the decades, the suburbs kind of like came into being, so that we now have Gosforth. But if you know where St Nick's is just now, if you can imagine Gosforth not being there, you could see from St Nick's, you could see out to the town moor and beyond. So it was kind of like out in the middle of nowhere at the time. But they did look at sites in North Shields. They looked at a potential site in the Red Bull pub and biker, Benton Lane, even Cowgate. So they looked at quite a few sites round and about, but they chose Gosforth or Kenton as the place where they wanted to build the asylum, because it was kind of like outside of Newcastle but not too far away. So that's basically why they chose that.
Can I ask you, can you see any of these proposals? Are they still knocking about?
I did, and that's kind of like what I referred to them. I've got the references in here, but I'll later on I'll go through it with you specifically, so that because there are loads of references. There's tons of stuff, and even I have to sort of sift through it to get to where I want to be. So yeah, the farmhouse itself wasn't exactly the site, but it was adjacent to where the hospital was built in the first instance. But it actually stayed as a farmhouse for many years, because they had animals and sort of they grew crops, and so it was kind of like a typical little farm in that sense. Next question, why was the farm called Dodds Farm when the owner was called George Dunn? That's a great question. Who was Dodds? It's the same Dodds who sometimes is listed in Newcastle Borough meeting proceedings. I mean, the short answer to that is I don't know. But the reason why I think it's a good question, because I remember asking myself the same question at the time. But my focus when I was sort of researching the book was just the hospital. I didn't want to get too distracted, and it was easy to do that, you know, because there was lots of interesting things to sort of grab your attention, and it would be nice to sort of follow it through and find out more. And I remember that question came up to me, but I think if I start to go down that route and try to find out Dodge Farm was owned by somebody called George Dunn, then I probably wouldn't have finished the book, you know. It would take me twice as long. It could be the same Dodge who's in the Newcastle Borough meetings, but as I say, I don't know. To find out would take me away from actually finding out about the hospital. But it's a project there for somebody to do. What happened to the farm tenant in Henry Hall who had gotten evicted from the farmhouse when it was to be converted into the hospital? I just don't know. I hope he was all right, you know, but he was kicked out of his home, you know. But it would be nice to find out. But the answer is I don't know the answer to that question. Where do the quotes from the second paragraph on page 13 come? I think they actually have referenced them as well, page 70 and 71, but again I'll look them out specifically.
Yeah, it's just there's a broad range of pages that.
That's right, yeah.
Pin
but-
the references on each page.
Yeah, there's a lot there, but I've kind of like teased out the specific references that you referred to, so I will sort of point them out to you. What happened to the foundation stone? It's probably still there as part of the luxury housing complex, but it'll probably be under layers of soil because over the decades, you know, there was, especially now, it was just built upon, but it still will be there because the building itself is a listed building. So they can't knock it down, basically. They can use it for other things, like they have done for luxury housing, but they can't knock it down. So the foundation stone would probably still be there.
Which is public property in a private place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Inaccessible.
Yeah, but I'm not even sure where it would be. It would probably be in the main entrance too, because St Nick's is actually two separate buildings joined together. But the first one was built opened in 1869, and then the extensions came in 1900, which is what the main entrance to St Nick's is just now. That's kind of like, so I think, viewed as the hospital.
Yes,
But it's actually the luxury housing bit is the original hospital in 1869.
And the farm, I think, as well, has been privatised. I think that's still standing.
That's right. Yeah, that's been, and that's again typical up and down the country when they were selling land off for the hospital, for not just for housing but for luxury housing and very expensive property.
Yeah.
Is farmhouse on page 25 the same one that can be seen on Google Maps? I would think it would be.
It looks similar. It looks very similar. You can't see properly into it because there's trees not in the way,
But you can actually go for a walk around it. I mean, in Lanesborough Court is kind of like fenced off, if you like, you know, because of security. But the farmhouse again has been sold off for residential properties, and it's got a little sort of play park there, and it's laid out with some greenery and grass.
There's a little nature reserve, isn't it, at the top?
No, that's to the side of it.
Oh, right.
But you can actually walk through from Kenton Lane. You can walk through to where the farmhouse is, or the building is. But again, it's private accommodation. I did walk around there myself last year, in fact, and I used to work in there. It was quite interesting. I used to go for a drink there as well, because I had the social club as well downstairs
in the farmhouse
building. Yeah. In those days, it was used as a day hospital. I'm going back to the 70s and 80s. Used as a day hospital, and part of it was also the hospital social club as well. So I was a regular visitor there. But yes, that would be the same one in Google Maps. What document does the map of the informal local plan on page 286 come from? Again, I've got the specific reference for you, page 294, page 295. But this is something I know because I've done it, is that you can access online. You can get the full document online because it's from Newcastle City Council. So that you can actually access the whole document, it's about 25 pages or something. And there's another a conservation paper that's accessible online as well. So I think they would be very useful, very helpful for you in terms of what you're looking at. Who owns the Lanesborough Court now? Private housing estate located where the hospital used to be. Why is it called Lanesborough Court? I think you probably have to ask Ewing Construction, you know, the building people. Ewing is in Y-U-I-L-L, the construction company. They were the ones that sort of probably bought the land off the trust and built on it. In fact, if you go into Sanderson and Young housing estates, you know, the estate agents, I went on it this morning, and what you see is the inside, some of the inside of the buildings as well, and they're all luxury apartments. It's just amazing what they can do with sort of refurbishment and throwing money at things, and really sort of, it's kind of like.
So actually, if we were to contact them to ask for a flat viewing, pretending to be like wanting to buy it or something, and we could actually visit the site.
It's worth a go, yes.
We'd have to look rich.
Yeah.
But it's certainly worth going on to Sanderson and Young housing estate agents to just type in Lanesborough Court.
Yeah.
And the same with the Ewing Constructions. If you go onto their website, there's a little bit of information on there.
Presumably because a listed building, they had to keep the infrastructure and just got it. And
That's right.
So the actual building's still intact, but the insides have been torn.
That's right. That's really where the two documents, the two papers, the informal local plan, and the other one is the conservation, you know, that sort of paper on keeping things intact. Because what they had to do was keep the core building like the actual building of Lanesborough Court, but also the building that still functions as a hospital. You know the main entrance. That's still
the new bit.
Yeah.
The newer bit. Yeah.
That's still part of the Northumberland
headquarters.
Tyne Way Trust. So they have to keep that. They have to keep it. Yeah.
Did they, I wonder what they found. You know, when they've done all that building, whether they found any skeletons or anything.
Yeah. Well, that, you know, for me, that's the interesting bit, is that the bit that everybody knows is the bit that came along more than 30 years after the original.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I
and then it just got bigger and bigger. But that's what people know. And then at that time, the original hospital became the female side, and the new bit became the male side. Do you know where the theatre is in the main corridor?
I haven't been there, but I've seen it referred to.
Yeah, it's got two doors leading into the theatre. The reason for that is that one door is for the men coming up this way to go to the theatre, and the other door here is for the ladies coming down to go to the
They were
theatre.
kept segregated, weren't they? For even,
Yeah.
you were allowed to have balls and things, but mainly they were kept apart.
Yeah, they were kept segregated pretty much up until the 1960s, as far as staff are concerned. Patients weren't integrated till much later than that. So it's quite a recent thing.
And there were children there, weren't there?
There were kids there with learning disabilities because there was nowhere else to put them. They were on adult wards, things that would never be allowed to happen these days.
Did you mention that book that one of the favourite drinks was lime juice and cream of tartar and sugar.
Yeah.
I tried that. It's
Did
very
you?
nice. Yeah.
Is it good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, things that are sort of you wouldn't think of today, like some people were prescribed beer and porter,
Yeah,
you know,
what you're saying,
as part of the sort of
Opiates.
the regime. Yeah. So there's all sorts of things that were deemed to be of benefit at the time. What would have been the fire hazard strategy in case of a big fire? I mean, that again is a really important one because the whole thing, the whole asylum, was extremely vulnerable to the dangers of fire because apart from anything else, they had open fires, you know, and sort of coal fires and woods. That was the way that walls were heated. Central heating didn't come along until decades after that, you know. And even then, they had sort of gas lamps, you know, lights that were lit by, you know, like the old gas lamp type thing. So the fire was always a big problem or danger. But they did have fire buckets dotted around the place with sand, and in later decades they had an underground water, concrete reservoir of water. Then they had the water towers as well that could be used. But it was also as a way of helping to draw air down. They had a system of ventilation that helped to reduce the dangers of fire spreading. And they had concrete. They had fireproof flooring, and they had concrete ceilings, which is a way of minimising the risk of fire spreading.
Or I was thinking of what did they do with the patients if it was a big fire? Did they evacuate them somewhere?
I think they did, and again, it wasn't until quite late that the staff started to have fire drills and evacuation, practice evacuations in the light of that.
They wouldn't have known what to do if there was a huge and everybody had to get out of it because they could escape.
Well, the actual all the wars in those days, you know, if you go back to the early days, they had what they call the airing courts. So you had the walls, and you had French windows and doors that opened up into airing courts.
So the bit in the middle was the hospital.
Yeah, so in an emergency, you just open the doors and people could go into the airing court, and they would still be restricted in where they could move, you know, because the airing court.
Yeah, you've still got that in the Tranmere, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was an enclosed area in that sense. But yeah, fire was always a big, or the risk of fire was always a big problem. Why did they decide to shut down the hospital? The hospital hasn't actually shut down. It's still functioning, but it's smaller. And the services contracted, became smaller. Say services contracted. The services that were on site were now based in community services or various other sort of day hospitals.
We've still got this Newcastle Psychology Services there.
It's in the civics building, yeah.
At the, you know, on Jubilee Road.
Yeah.
We've got the day service there where you can go for assessment.
Yeah, that's the Welford Day Centre. I don't think that's part of the hospital though. That's part of social services. But the site did belong at one time to the hospital.
There's a lot built on Jubilee Road. Wasn't there a big site there or something at one time? Top of Jubilee Road. You mentioned it in the books. I don't know what was there, but the expansion or something went there.
Yeah, it's sort of that was in the 1950s when they got some land across the road where the Collingwood Clinic was built.
That's right. Yeah. But isn't there a Collingwood Clinic at Newcastle General? I keep getting confused. I thought there was one up there as well.
Yeah, that would probably be an inpatient unit. They probably called it the Collingwood Clinic. as a way of commemorating the original Collingwood
Right,
Clinic.
yeah.
'Cause I know that they do stuff like that.
I think there was 2, the Hadrian Clinic for women and the Collingwood for men, is that? Ward, I might call it Ward, I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like 10 years since I left, so I don't know what they've done in the meantime. But I'd probably
I'm not
call
expecting it to
they'll probably call it different things, but I'd say they'll probably be connected to the past in that sense.
Yeah, anything like you can share on it.
Yeah, so the hospital hasn't actually closed down, but it is much smaller than it used to be. And that's mainly because all the services that were once on site are now out in the community, whether it's community mental health teams or day hospitals, but old people. I mean, but for decades, the majority of patients in St Nick's were old people. You know, I mean, even up until the 1980s when I was there was something like 1,100 patients there. You know, there was a lot of people, and more than half of them were old people. So that these people, you know, the elderly are now in sort of nursing homes in the community. So there's a lot of changes in that sense. It just got smaller as the services became more frequent in the community. We read about how source of funding for service development coming from the sale of land on the main hospital and Collingwood clinics, but we don't really understand how this works economically. I mean that's really quite a complicated one, but the actual amount of land, we're talking about 115 acres of land, only a very small part of that was the actual hospital. It was all sort of real estate in the sense that the surrounding land was where they grew vegetables and it's where the asylum was self-sufficient in growing things, you know, its own produce and what have you. But in the 80s, caring in the community came along, and to fund that properly meant, and this was not unique to Newcastle, it was the same everywhere, to sell off the land in order to raise the funds to be able to afford to develop new services that were in the community where people came from. That was the theory. It was very, very contentious, very controversial at the time, and it wasn't always implemented properly in that sense. But it was kind of like new for everybody involved. It had never happened before. But definitely the hospital became smaller, and everything was based in the community. All the services were based in the community, and those services were paid for by selling off the land at the time. So it was quite controversial even now.
But that was just one-off payment. Yeah, selling off land. It's not a sustainable model, is it? Because the money's going to run out eventually.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at nowadays, if you look at house prices, for example, you know, selling land and buying land, it's got to be done at the right time in order to make as much money as you can out of it. I mean, it's like buying a house, and you have to buy the land before you can build a house. But you know, the value of land is subject to going up and down, depending on what else is happening in the economy. So,
is there any way of finding out who owns the land? Is there a website or something?
I think probably you, sort of construction, would be the people.
Is that you?
Y-U-I-L-L.
Y-U-I-L-L.
That's right. But I think the land's been sold off, and that's why it was at the time it was really important to do it to get the best possible price, you know, because it could only be sold once in that sense. But it may be that getting somebody from NTW to come and talk about how services are commissioned, because it's all about commissioning of services, and NTW, Northumberland Tyne and Weir Trust, is a provider of services in terms of you know, getting funding for those services.
The chair of the recovery college is on.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, I mean, and that's really where St Nick's, in that sense, was a self-sufficient little town. Everything on site, I've just mentioned that before, had its own workshops, a woodwork, metal workshop, cobblers, laundry, kitchen, had a hairdressing, had a sort of shop where you could buy things, like any shop, you could buy things.
And that would have been like classed as occupational therapy at the time.
Yeah, they had that as well. So they had gardening squads where people could walk outside in the garden. They had theatre.
It sounds a lot better than
Yeah.
being stuck in a confined hospital today. You know, that sounds
That's
better.
right,
way of
yeah.
doing things.
So all these activities like the wood shop and etc. They were managed by the patients or external people.
It was had a nurse or a nurse therapist as the head, but the patients would make garden benches, tables in the wood workshop, in the metal workshop. They would make wrought iron gates and all sorts of stuff. I remember when I was a student there, I used to help out. I used to sort of run around getting things for people. And,
Shoes.
that's right, yes. I was, like a gopher, sort of they needed things, so I'll go and get it. But yeah, it was very, very self-sufficient in that sense. Yeah, that's pretty much all the questions that I was asked. I've tried to answer. I mean, if you've got other questions, then by all means fire away.
I think you've answered all the ones I want very well. The bit about the farmhouse and the tenant, I'd like to know what happened.
Yeah, that would be good to know that.
You just kick them out or
Yeah.
Just kind of like the archive underneath, the information that were held underneath. We were talking last time about like sort of like the archive that was there, that you couldn't find information. Or was it just the proposal?
Sorry, I think a lot of it might be held in the Newcastle Library, because a lot of references you've got in there relating to the Newcastle
you
Library.
probably could. The archives would be a good place to start. And as you probably know, the staff at Tinyware Archive Cells are very helpful.
Yeah.
So that,
Oh yeah.
But it does require a degree of persistence, and being a bit of a detective and finding your way around things and making sense of stuff in order to get what you want.
Well, it might be
There's so
there,
much
but
information there,
I'd probably have to spend a lot more time there to sort of dig it
Yeah,
out.
I spent years there.
Yes.
So what made you want to write this book actually? What made you want to write this book?
Well, actually, that's a good question, but at the time, I was waiting for a meeting to start, and I was talking to a friend of mine, a colleague, and we were talking about the hospital, and we were talking about the long history I had, and my friend Dave said, somebody should write a history of this place, And I went away and I thought about that, and I kind of like, at the time I didn't know what I was planning to do. I just wanted to find out a little bit more, and it was only over a period of time that, because the information I found was a bit here and a bit there, different on the 1950s, then 1920s, and then sort of 1970s, and I thought, well, hang on, I've got to try and make some sense of this, and I thought, what's the best way to go about it? And I thought, well, the logical thing is to start at the beginning and to work your way right through to the end, which is pretty much what I did, but it took me 9 years to do that, and that's not where that came from.
You're in a patient magazine, we discovered as well, aren't you? You wrote an article in one of the magazines at the time.
Yeah, the hospital had a great magazine called Vista.
Yeah, that was
It ran from 1959 to 1963. And I did have a copy of all the editions. In fact, the person who gave me a copy of all the editions was the actual editor of the magazine at the time, John Knight. And I had a little group at the time, going back to the 1990s, and we had a little St Nick's history group made up of managers and other people, but there was not a great deal of support for it, unfortunately. But John knew of my interest in the hospital, so he gave me a carrier bag full of all the hospital magazines, Vista magazines, the originals, case copies. I kept them for years, and I used some of it as a resource to go in here. But I kind of donated all the editions, each edition to Tyne Archive Service. So you could probably, if you wanted to, you could go and access them and read them.
Yeah, we've seen some of them.
There's hundreds of them. They came out every month for about 4 or 5 years, and it gives you a little fascinating little insight into the issues of the day.
Was it mainly from? Was it from patients' perspective as well as staff? Was it?
No, it was very much a staff thing. Yeah, that was kind of like the way things were. It was very much a paternalistic regime, in the sense that staff pretty much directed everything for the benefit of the patients. Rightly or wrongly, that's the way it was. And that started to change from the 1980s onwards. But even straight through, it was pretty much that way.
Like, I was thinking, looking maybe like back at your project, so like once you finish your book, was there anything that was missing from your story? They were like, I didn't get it, or I probably should investigate it more on the aspect. Do you think there's something missing from your story?
I think I've pretty much done everything that I could have done as far as the hospital itself is concerned, and the issues that prevailed at the time. But what I felt that I didn't do, and it wasn't really the focus of this was more about how the hospital came to be. But what was missing was the patient perspective. This is a book about the hospital. I've actually just finished another book on case histories, patient case histories. I've done that in double quick time. It's only taken me about 5 or 6 years to do it. So I'm hoping to get that published probably next year sometime. But it's case histories of patient case history from the 19th century.
Why do you think it's important to collect people's experiences?
Well, what's not important about it, it really is essential to get that perspective, how it was for people. But bear in mind that the case histories as such are taken from the case books. And all these case books, big books like that and open like that. I mean, as you've seen, and it's all in longhand. So it's very much from the staff's perspective. But it does give you a very vivid account of what the patient was experiencing.
Yeah.
And the thing that I've got out of it, I was reading up, I've got about 48 or so, 50 case histories. And some of them are really compelling in the sense that these poor people, the difficult time that they had. But at the same time, a lot of people did come into the asylum to be treated because of traumatic life events that they had. And with the right support and treatment, they did go home again. So coming into the asylum wasn't necessarily where you stayed. For a lot of people, it was where they stayed for 30, 40 years. But other people stayed for a few months, for a few weeks even, But it is really essential, I think, to get a feeling of what it was like for people in those days. bearing in mind that though it was more of a sort of custodial thing, you know, mainly because of the sheer numbers. You know, because we're talking about, say, 50 people to a ward, 60 people sometimes. But that changed over the course of the decades. But yeah, so I'll see if I can do something like that next year.
Were you able to release photographs from that as well?
Yeah, some of them. I've got about up to 48 case history. I've got about 24 with photographs. Mm-hmm. The thing with doing that is that it's illegal to disclose patient identifiable information of the previous within 100 years.
Yeah.
So that all the information I've got collated is more than 100 years old. It's illegal to do, disclose things within that period.
I know we've actually had restrictions even from 100.
Yeah.
That this is an example actually.
1911.
So we've had to do like artistic representations
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
photos and take off any names or personalised data. So it's quite interesting to hear that you have had access.
Yeah, it's, I think it's as opposed to 100-year embargo.
Yeah.
Really. So so the stuff I've managed to access is more than 100 years old.
Yeah. It's understandable actually completely when you think about families and people involved.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So any other questions around the table? What was your personal connection with?
Sorry?
What was your personal connection with St Nicolas? Did you say?
I started work there as a nursing assistant in 1977. I started my nurse training about 6 months after that, at the end of 1977. And I qualified as a staff nurse in 1980. I got a job as a staff nurse in the Collingwood Clinic at the time, or the Kielder Clinic it was then. And then in the mid-80s I went to do my sort of general nurse training to be an RGN. I came back in 1986. I got a job as a charge nurse, then as a ward manager. I was pretty much a ward manager for about 16 or 17 years. And then I changed direction and became a clinical link with the university, Northumbria University, and the hospital to support students doing the nurse training and staff nurses who were supporting the students. So I was supporting the staff who were supporting the students in that sense. So I've done that for the last few years of my career. But I was either based at St Nick's or working in St Nick's for 32 years. Until 9 years ago.
You see a lot of change in the system.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's totally different, totally. And even in the 9 or 10 years that since I've left, it's probably changed beyond all recognition again. It's a big change.
How was perceived the mental health hospital, like from the area, from his own citizens here in Newcastle? How was it perceived, and their perception is it changed through the time? Or
From the local area?
Yeah, from the local area, what was the kind of like?
I mean, at the time, paradoxically, a lot of people in the local area walked to the hospital, because you had the hospital houses at the bottom, on the outskirts of the grounds, the hospital grounds, and even people who lived locally. So you had a lot of the local population walk to the hospital, and they would probably with their neighbours. So people grew up with the hospital being there, basically. I know from anecdotal sort of conversations I've had with people who grew up with St Nick's being there, and they just take it for what it is, not just something that was there when they were growing up. Again in the 80s, that's really where the hospital canteen, the restaurant, it was called Walters. And Walters was open to the general public, so people started to come in. Then you had the wildlife park. Then you had other services like the post office coming in. So as the hospital, and you had a sort of Churchview, you had a nursery. There was a nursery service based at Churchview. So you had a lot of external sort of things happening to encroach within the hospital itself. Whereas for a long time, decades and decades, it was seen as this mysterious place,
Yeah, so it kind of like helps the people to connect with the facility.
Yeah, in fact, there's a bit in the book where I've taken from newspaper articles in the 1950s, for example, where it does give an insight into how local people at the time thought, because it started knocking the walls down to make Salter Road bigger, so there was over the years that there was a literally knocking down of walls and barriers to make it more open.
Is that the picture in the back near the back of the book where you've got the hospital shown through the knockdown walls?
Yeah.
What really was vivid in the book was the way we described it in the period where in the First World War when it became the Northumberland War Hospital.
That's right.
And in a matter of weeks they cleared everybody out, scrubbed it down with disinfectants, and there's a bit you talk about where there's all these wounded soldiers and horses and carts coming up from France in the middle of the night, and it was thick mist and fog and
that's right, yes,
and the horses' hooves were muffled. I don't know why that would be, but
yeah, that's
just picture that very vivid.
Yeah, that was. I got a letter from somebody whose grandparents that actually happened to. They came, if I remember right. The mother of the soldier and his fiancée came to St Nick's as a Northumberland War Hospital looking for the son and the fiancée, and couldn't find them because all the troops were coming from Newcastle Central Station in horse-drawn carriages to St Nick's, and then they found them. So it was kind of like a happy ending in that regard,
Well, I mean, it's amazing how fast they worked when they had to. They cleared the whole hospital.
Well, I mean, it was a time of national emergency. I mean, but to me it was, it's actually the subject of what I'm doing at the moment. I've got another project on the go, and I'm kind of like looking at the whole First World War thing. I mean, if you can imagine, we'd only having, say, about 6 weeks' notice to having 900 patients decanted out to other parts of the country. Phenomenal. Yeah. So there is a story to be told there. I'll probably spend the next 5 or 10 years doing that.
I was going to ask you what your next project is.
Yeah. But there you go. Yeah, there you go.
There's just a couple of quotes on page 50 of the book that I would like to. When you finished, just if you can remember where you got them from.
Yeah, sure. I'll tease them out for you because there is a lot of references. I did have to be. I was a bit obsessional about it.
There's lots of
totally
references
focused
in the
on it
back.
for
I'm
years.
just wondering which one the quote comes from. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, if you want, sorry. I did. I mean, it's been years since I've done it, but I did do a little presentation when I was before I retired, on aspects of life in the asylum, and I think I've still got that stuff somewhere lying around. So if you would like me to come back in the future to do a little presentation, then I'd be quite happy to do that.
Well, yeah, I think we'd love that if,
Yeah.
if you're happy to.
Maybe do that in the new year. If,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I was just going to ask, just with your time involved with St Nick's and the trust, were you aware of any kind of patients' unions or like survivors movements? Because they kind of came up around the 90s, which you kind of mentioned.
Yeah. There was, I think, Launchpad. I think there was a
It started there, I think, didn't it?
Launchpad. Yeah. There's a guy called Alistair Cameron. Do you know Alistair?
Yeah, he's on our board actually.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yes.
Well, Alistair probably would
I haven't
know.
chatted to Alistair yet, actually.
Yeah, because I know he was heavily involved in. I still sometimes see him, bump into him and stuff. Yeah, but he would know a bit about that. And then they had the arts department then, and then other. There was all they had what they call a social and recreation department, run by a chap called at one time Richard Groves. He was a charge nurse, long since retired now. But the social and rec department had all sorts of things happening for patients at the time. Yeah, so there's things like in the asylum days, they had weekly dances, and they had one of the things I've never found out. I'd love to have found out, apart from the occasional reference, was there was a hospital orchestra, but I've never found any references other than a passing reference to the hospital.
Patients, was it?
Yeah, made up for. So I'd love to find out more about that.
What period was this?
Probably in the early days, all the way through. But it's kind of like tantalising because you have these little references to things. And
Is that what formed the basis for maybe the Gloucester Musical Society? Because they perform, like they work with the Jubilee Theatre.
I think that this was probably even before the Jubilee Theatre was there. But I think that was kind of like a separate thing.
They just had their 90th anniversary thing.
Have they?
Yeah, like about 2 weeks ago they did it at my work, so maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah. But then they did have orchestras, and there was always a weekly dance that was very well attended by all accounts.
Well, you wouldn't dream of counting such a thing now, would you? I mean, weekly dance in a tramway or somewhere like that.
No. But that's really where that's where the theatre, the main hall, would have come into its own. But even in the original asylum, they had a hall there. But even if you see the Yule construction, if you go into Sanderson and Young and you get an idea of the interior of the original asylum, I mean, it's all luxurious. I had a look this morning, and
I think I've been on it because
it's amazing.
I pulled out the prices of these flats, you know, from I think that might have been
A flat will cost you 300,000 or something,
yeah.
you know. But it gives you an indication of the actual sizeness and the vastness of the actual buildings themselves, and they were definitely built to last, you know.
And about how many flats were they made out of that?
They have put a figure on it. I think in the Yule website, about 30 or 40 flats.
They were huge. We saw on the website that you posted that they were huge, 1 bedroom apart.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah.
Yeah, but huge.
Like two floor was just like 1 bedroom flat.
Yeah. You've mentioned you go to Tyne and Wear Archives services. Do you go anywhere else to find out information?
I've popped into the Woodhall and they're keen to work with us, but I think just for our budget we'd have to do visits when they're open rather than specific sessions. But we're more than happy to go there as well.
Whereabouts was that?
Woodhorn.
Oh yeah, the hut.
St George's.
St George's, that's right. Yeah, I've had a look in there. It's really just like the archive service in Newcastle. It's excellent, you know.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, have you ever been to the Central Library of the local studies?
I have chatted to Fiona there. She's
Yeah.
happy for us to look as well. We've got lots.
Yeah, they've got because I drew a lot of my sources. A lot of my sources came from the local studies. And of course, there's a lot of stuff online as well. Even just to Google stuff, you know, put in certain phrases. But that's how I sort of track down trains of thought. You know, just googling certain phrases and see what comes up. You know. But yeah.
Any further questions?
Just the references in the book.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like, I'm just like sort of like personal. When you overcome like difficulties in terms of you want to read some stuff from the archive, but like issue about privacy. So, how would you go to overcome the sort of like difficulties?
Of
Like you
accessing.
said, like be persistent. Okay. Like keep looking. You might gonna find something else.
It really is a case of detective work, you know. I mean, the problem is, you know, not enough information or what is there. It's just that the information is overwhelming, and it's finding out what you need to know, what you want to know. But you can only look at, as I said before, you know, the 100-year embargo is that they're not. The staff of the archives will not allow you to look at anything that's less than 100 years from a patient perspective. So it has to be more than 100 years.
I was wondering if there is, because actually one of our members have asked, because she thinks she's within the archives.
Yeah.
Would you be able to access it if you have? Would you know if you would be able to, if you have personal information of your own in there? It was like rights in a way.
I'm not sure. I think, I mean, a lot of the stuff that when I was working at St Nick's, people knew of my interest in the history of St Nick's. And at that time in the 80s, people were moving departments. And it's a bit like when you're moving house, you know, you come across stuff that you don't really have a use for anymore. And people would come across various books and ledgers about the history of the place and didn't know what to do with them, didn't want them, so they gave them to me. And I stored them in a cupboard somewhere, and then at some point I decided I can't really keep this sort of stuff in a cupboard, so I donated a lot of stuff to Tiny Ware Archives.
Are these like objects and things, like actual things?
No, they'll not take, it's usually just sort of documents and
Where's there must be some like souvenirs or something like you know when they renovated buildings and that, where did all the stuff end up, you know?
well, you see, it's
some physical objects.
that's a good point. I think over the years staff came across these things because they weren't curated or logged or monitored. People just, that's a nice souvenir, take it home.
Brass chandeliers and things.
Well, I don't know about things like that, but I know some things were donated to, but in terms of small things, I mean, I know that the boardroom table in St Nick's was donated to various companies, but perhaps wrongly, you know. I mean, these were...
So, I mean, the foundation store, you said there's a bottle and a few newspapers and coins in there, so nobody's ever going to get to see that.
That's right, yeah.
There's nothing in the museum archives, in the museum objects.
Yeah.
Because I've looked at their database, and there's nothing apart from a few photographs.
Not surprising. They haven't got any object list.
No.
When I was a ward manager, the housing estate was being built where I was at the time, and so that, you know, the bulldozers were in digging the ground up. And one day I had a chap knocking on the door of where I worked. He was walking his dog, and he had a carrier bag full of stuff, china, broken china, covered in mud. Could have been unearthed by the bulldozers when they were sort of building the housing estate. So I took it home and washed the mud off, and what it was broken crockery, and it had sort of city asylum on it. I think I may have it somewhere. I'm not quite sure what I've done with it, but I haven't got a complete enamel cup. But there is stuff like that, but there will be loads of stuff around.
Yeah, there must have been a lot of stuff that missed.
Yeah.
I
Bulldozers.
think stuff just took souvenirs when they left. I think a lot of the time, if it was movable stuff like that.
Yeah. Plus, in those days, nobody was interested.
No.
It's just, I mean, I could kick myself now. I mean, even when I started the project, I was kind of like about 20 years into my career when I sort of started that, And if I had that sort of interest when I first started, I could have collected so much stuff, So I'm kicking myself a little bit,
Something now and actually go and show some.
Yeah. But there, people just weren't interested. It wasn't seen as important, And even the stuff that did legitimately go to somewhere and donated, there probably wouldn't have been any record of it, any sort of document to say that it's gone where it's gone. It just seems to have disappeared. But I did, one of the things, because I kind of like gave a lot of stuff to the Tyneware archives, and some of the stuff I gave were, the big portraits of the medical superintendents, and big wooden sort of that hang on the boardroom and stuff like that. They were taken down and just put against the wall. And I said, well, I'm having them, So I took them back to my ward and I stored them there. And then, again, over a period of time, I gave them to Tyneware archives. I mean, technically, this stuff belongs to the trust, but because I assumed responsibility for them and gave them to the archives, I'm recognised by the archives as the owner of this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So exactly, if we look into the object and records and we look for the daughters, you result.
Possibly, yeah. I can't even remember what I've got. Just stuff that came my way, I did donate. The only thing I've still got, I know I've got, is a portable ECT machine. And I'm looking for a hospital museum to donate that to.
Portable ECT machine.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it just a black book?
Yeah, just like a black box with a little dial on it,
Does it still work?
I don't know. I've never tried it. But it's certainly quite imposing. Yeah. Basically, like a headset, you put it on, plugged in, you dial the voltage. I don't have any photographs of it. I've taken photographs of it. I'll dig out the photographs I've got.
Like Beamish Museum has got anything?
I don't think so. I think I may have contacted them. And I know there's a hospital museum down in Leeds somewhere. Sorry? Wakefield, yeah. I did make inquiries a couple of years ago. Then I never heard back from them. Kind of like just.
Yeah, they're actually one of the few objects that quite a few places do have.
Yeah.
CT machines.
Yeah. So I've got it. It's just in the cupboard and just there. And I would like to donate it to somewhere, but I haven't found anywhere yet. perhaps the next time if you want me to come along again in the new year, as well as doing a little presentation on aspects of asylum life, both from the patient's perspective and the staff perspective. I've got various photographs and stuff that you might find
That'd be
interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's been a
thank
real
you.
pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, have a good rest of
Fantastic work.
Okay,
Yeah, just
you
get
want...
another reference, yeah. Just,
Uh,
I think it's page 15.
the one
If
that...
anyone wants to record, like reading the
Together.
yeah, I can, yeah. Do you want to record them as well?
You must have got some sources about the proposals.
Yeah.
And you've got some in quotes on in the text, but I don't know which of these it refers to. You see?
This one here, Newcastle City Council Planning Department,
Oh yeah,
1989.
right.
St
I
Nick's-
gathered that'll be in the library. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
you can Google it, or you can
Oh,
get
it's
it
on
online.
it's on the internet. Yeah.
There's another one. The conservation report.
I think I've seen that. I think I have that up online.
Yeah, well, definitely that one's online. You can do the whole
Right. Okay.
the whole document. What was the other one that you?
It was the thing you've got in quotes in the text. I think it's
Oh, yeah.
page 15. It looks like you've got it from somewhere, but I can't work out on the reference list which one it is. Right, this is the bit I'm interested in, where they're looking about for the site,
Yeah.
and then you see little bits in quotes there.
Yeah.
Which reference are these refer to?
That would be magistrates for the Borough of Newcastle and the Visited Committee of Justices.
All right, I had a look at them last week and I couldn't find much about the. I couldn't find much about the proposals. They must be somewhere else. I thought.
You know, in terms of the where to.
Bye-bye.
Hang on.
That'll be the 4th of January, right?
Maybe. We have to double check.
Oh, here we are. Yeah. Newcastle Council reports, 1865 to 66.
Yeah, all right, yeah. I
That
thought
one.
it might be them. Yeah.
That would be at the Central Library,
Yeah, yeah.
the Local Studies Department.
Yeah, I think that's.
And if you look for that reference
Right.
there, that'll give you that.
That's great. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a big book and there's pages and pages
Yeah,
of
I
it.
think that's what I'm missing.
Yeah, that's
So
the
what's
one
the
that you
reference
want.
number? Central line. So is this the reference number? For
That's the reference number for it. Yeah.
3, 5, 10.
Or is anyone interested?
What's the eyes? Is that part of the reference number?
Yeah, that's right. Just brackets.
Right, right.
Are you interested?
But that's the one that will get you that particular.
Great, because I'm interested in how it got set. How the very very start. You know, before the hospital was built.
Yeah.
How did they get people? How did they make it from
Thank
a
you,
farm
Johnny.
into patients being there? You know, and
Yeah.
how did they manage that? You know.
Have you had any?
Yeah, that's it, because it was really started from scratch, you know.
That's the bit I'm interested in, how it actually got started, you know, because
Yeah.
it must have been a lot of organisation and,
Yeah.
you know,
In fact, a little bit at the beginning of the book itself gives you some indication as to what's involved in it. You know.
well, I mean, Benson at the side, it's beside where I live, like, it's Benson Community Centre now, I think it is. I can see little, in the gardens there, and I can see little bits of old shuts and things. That looks very, very old.
Oh, it's fascinating. finding out a little bit about stuff that's, you know, people take for granted, you know. Because it's about looking at the very beginning. It's a bit like looking at where St Nick says, you know, if you didn't have Gosforth there, you can see out over the town moor.
Well, it says in the book, you see that the prospectus for the new site, that they went to the corner of Kenton Lane and
That's right, yeah.
I looked on Google Maps and it's just all houses there. You can't
That's
see
right,
anything.
yeah, no. But it would have been totally different in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. Well, you can see it in the very old maps. The first one, you know, where it's just the farmhouse, nothing else.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the first St Nicholas building, the square, the H shape, and then the latter part appears just after that.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know about.
Yeah.
I just thought it off. I thought I've never even been there. You know? It's been too cold until it gets dark too early.
Oh yeah, I'd best leave it to the
We can do it.
Okay, it was nice to meet you.
Oh, it's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind, yeah.
With the book.
With the book?
Well, I love the book.
Pull it together as well. There we go. Last one was good.
Can I take one too?
First two, your eyes were closed.